I'll do this sort of like a play-by-play as I read through the pages. Oh, here we go, right from the beginning. We already know what happened, so just tell us, okay? We're going to be able to tell when you're not being honest. I know cops do this for confessions and to fill in pieces of the puzzle, but you'd think they'd stop him when the evidence says otherwise. Also, would they not say something like, "This lying bastard says he shot her in the garage. There isn't a single bullet there, so we told him that and pressed him for the truth." None of that happens in this case, so it makes one wonder. Are these high-level law enforcement officers stupid, or are they doing this for a reason? I think the end result and the finding of the magic bullet answer that question, but I'll continue. Whoa, did I miss something? I read both transcripts from February 27th, and nowhere did it mention what Tom Fassbender says on page 22, where he says, quote, "We know that he already had his altercation with Teresa." Okay, what altercation would that have been? Where would you have found this out? And then Tom Fassbender says, quote, "You told me that you thought, thinking back now, that there was blood. It was red in color, plus you're at your house." Right here, with absolutely no inkling of this type of story or facts ever coming out of Brendan Dassey's mouth, Tom Fassbender starts to lay the seeds of the story that Brendan Dassey is about to tell. If you don't believe me, go back and read the first two interviews. Brendan Dassey says nothing of the sort. Tom Fassbender, whose car is in the garage? Mark Wiegert, we already know, just tell us, it's okay. Fassbender, the truth, that's it. It's so easy to tell the truth. It's hard to make things up. Brendan Dassey, her Jeep. Tom Fassbender, that's right. Wow. I apparently need lessons from Tom Fassbender on how to pick up women. If it's that easy, bam! Just put them in a room and ask the question until you get the answer you want. Then congratulate them with, "That's right." And a towel. Right here, they're putting him in the garage and telling him what to say. This is why he'll be arrested. Page 25. While talking about her being in the back of the Jeep, Tom Fassbender, quote, "Was she tied up already, or did you help with that?" What is the reason to ask that? Again, there's nothing Brendan Dassey has said or done, nor is there evidence of such, and Tom Fassbender busts out with this? You never said anything before, but did you help out with that? Page 27. Tom Fassbender, quote, "Why did he have you come over there? He needed help with something, didn't he?" Not, did he need help with something? Or what did he need help with? Then he responds, probably to get rid of the body. Not, move wood or fix the car or perhaps clean the garage. Wouldn't that be something you'd want Brendan Dassey to admit? Not if he's going to help with Teresa Hallbach's disappearance. I mean, the whole reason you're here is because those jeans were in the garage, right? Because he was cleaning. Again, even here, why does Tom Fassbender keep asking Brendan Dassey if he's sure that the big door is open? Page 29. Mark Wiegert, quote, "Did he tell you why he was peed off at her? I think he told you. Be honest." Looking for a motive, are we? What if there is none because your supposed suspect didn't do it? But having a motive completes your trifecta of means, motive, and opportunity now, doesn't it? Tom Fassbender says he had you come over to see this. Exactly. Why would he drag his own nephew into something like this for his disposal and or to burn when he managed to subdue, tie, and kill her all on his own? Even that part doesn't make any logical sense. And that he was pissed off at Teresa Hallbach because he couldn't get his blazer in the magazine? Boy, these two are really grasping at straws, but apparently it's working. You see, not getting a blazer in his magazine, kill somebody instead of collect $36 million. Yeah, I totally get it. How would they know if she was or wasn't covered up if there was no body at all? There couldn't be a blanket over her at all? The only person who would know that would be whoever put her in the back of the RAV4, in which case, why would they know that? Do Link and Colburn have accomplices? Are they tipping their hand that they know something that no one else knows? The only time thus far that Mark Wiegert has said, "If you're sure, that's okay," was the accusation of Steven Avery raping Teresa Hallbach. Odd. Brendan Dassey says, quote, "When he was done, that's when he put her in the back of the Jeep," which was in the garage. And why would he need Brendan Dassey's help if Steven Avery managed to do all that other stuff himself? Tom Fassbender says, "Was she dead yet then or no?" Brendan Dassey, yes. Tom Fassbender, how do you know that? I have a feeling I know how you know that. Now everything looks like it's drastically changing. Brendan Dassey says he goes to get the mail after he hears the screams. Then he sits down to watch TV. Major disconnect, yet the detectives don't seem to catch that. Now the vehicle is by the big trees. Nothing has been explained about what happened or how it got moved. Mark Wiegert, quote, "Be honest, you went inside, didn't you?" Not, "Did you go inside?" Mark Wiegert even says, "There's a video in your mind right now, like a picture." Yet not once throughout all these interviews has Brendan Dassey ever talked like it's a movie, all one word, one sentence answers. Then he says again, "There's a video in your head, play it for us." And still, one word answers. Then after his sweaty uncle lets him in with a woman screaming in the background, he offers him a soda. Then Steven Avery asks if he wants some of that. So basically he says, "Yeah, hey Unc, you got any soda? Oh, and some vagina while you're at it." Come on. Page 46. Tom Fassbender, quote, "We already know, we just need to hear it from you." Mark Wiegert, "Did he ask you?" Okay, ask what? Where did that come from? Mark Wiegert, "He asks you, doesn't he? I.e. if he wants some." Did they ever ask if it was instead the porn that Steven Avery had that he really meant? Was all of this because Steven Avery finally introduced his nephew to porn and that's what Brendan Dassey is trying to hide? Like Benny from LA Law? Was he so freaked out about seeing nudity that he thought this was his big secret? Page 47. Mark Wiegert, "Come on, be honest. You went back in that room. We know you were back there." Page 48. Tom Fassbender, Does she see you?" Did you really mean to say, "She sees you, doesn't she?" Just curious, Tom. You're formulating everything else. Page 49. Tom Fassbender, "We know what happened. What did you do?" I.e., come on, tell us. We want to hear. Apparently she doesn't say anything to him while he's doing this act, and yet it takes him 5 minutes. Not bad for a virgin. Then he says that she said she told him not to do this. Well, which is it? Page 53. Mark Wiegert says, "Brendan, be honest. You were there when she died, and we know it. Don't start lying now. We know you were there. What happened?" Okay, so now he moves on to how he's going to get him to have a part in killing her. Can't wait to see how they tie this in. Page 55. Mark Wiegert, "You helped to tie her up, didn't you?" Pause. "Brendan, because he couldn't tie her up alone, there's no way. Did you help him tie her up?" Brendan Dassey, "Yeah." Mark Wiegert, "Okay, tell me what you did." Solidifying his involvement, so Steven Avery goes from moving the body all by himself to Brendan Dassey tying her up. Convenient. Okay. Is there a reason that the tape has omitted parts? The ones used in the video testimony, they're not there from 11:45 to 12:26. The omitted parts are in the transcript though, so I guess that's what I have to work with. So, from the transcript, page 57. Mark Wiegert, "Do you help? Otherwise she's gonna kick." Tying her up, he means. When did that ever enter the conversation? Especially if she's shackled up. Page 59. Mark Wiegert, "What else did he do to her?" We know something else was done. Come on, something with the head. This is where he asks who shot her in the head. If Brendan Dassey, even after being coached with "what about her head," answers that he shot her, I would have a chance at buying this, but if the detectives don't have enough patience to give him that hint, then wait for the right answer, it just shows me that the possibility of them framing this whole narrative grows exponentially. Again, tipping their hand. This would have been what sealed the question for all doubters, and they couldn't do it. Was it by accident, stupidity, or choice? You'll notice it also goes from "what else did he do?" to "what did he make you do to her?" to "what did he make you do?" in a matter of seconds. Mark Wiegert asks if she was still alive since Brendan Dassey was supposedly there witnessing this, and then asks how. Brendan Dassey says she was breathing a little bit. Mark Wiegert repeats that and then asks, "Did Steve tell you that?" Why would Brendan Dassey need Steven Avery to tell him that she was breathing a little bit? That makes no sense in any situation or conversation. If Brendan Dassey would have said he left the room, that would have been one thing, but this makes no sense. Tom Fassbender, "How many times did you shoot her when he handed you the gun?" He asks this as Brendan Dassey was telling him that Steve shot her. They never preference with "did you shoot her?" Shut up. Now, the one thing that I will say about this is that he did correctly answer how many times she was shot in the head. Either he guessed correctly or he knew that somehow. Since it's the one piece of evidence that was never divulged to the public as far as I know, this is the first piece of any sort of corroboration of his testimony to the evidence. Now, that's a huge piece of testimony, but if all the other stuff has absolutely no truth to it, is that feasible to think that he's telling the truth on this? Is he telling some parts that really happened just somewhere else? Is he telling something that he saw someone do it, just not Steven Avery? Again, this is the only thing that I've heard thus far that even remotely justifies this crime taking place. But when he guessed the number of shots and changed his answer numerous times, it's very questionable. Not to mention, people guess the correct number on a roulette wheel all the time, so to correctly guess the number between 1 and 10 is not that reliable. Okay, Brenda Dassey just proves my point. Now he says she was shot 3 times, head, stomach, and heart. When asked which side of the head, he can't remember. Brendan Dassey said before, somewhere, that there was supposed to be people coming over, but they canceled. He now says that Steven Avery says they have to hurry because there was supposed to be people coming over. Who kills someone knowing that you will guaranteed have witnesses coming over later? Your spouse comes home from work at 6 o'clock every day, so you bring somebody over to get it on at 5:55? Makes no sense. Page 68. This is where they finally smash the last Horcrux. Tom Fassbender says, "We know there's some things you're not telling us. We need to get the accuracy about the garage and stuff like that and the car." He has said more than once, "I'm not going to tell you what to say, you tell us." Sounds like the manager at Tchotchke's from the movie Office Space telling Joanna about the pieces of flair. So, more pieces of flair? "We want you to express yourself, but some people choose to wear more, and we encourage that." Tom Fassbender, "You bring her out to the house, you took her out to the garage." Brendan Dassey, "Yes." "Wow, 8 lines after you tell him you're not going to tell him what to say." Brendan Dassey says, "On the side of the garage, every single time thus far. So much for not crafting your own story." Tom Fassbender, "Tell us where she was shot." Brendan Dassey, "In the head." Tom Fassbender, "No, I mean where? In the garage." Way to go, Tom. Really making my case for me. Then Brendan Dassey says, "Oh." Then for some reason Tom Fassbender says, "Outside, in the house," whatever that means. Then Brendan Dassey somehow gives them, "In the garage." What the Then Tom Fassbender says, "Okay." Then Mark Wiegert says, "Was she on the garage floor or was she in the truck?" Brendan Dassey, "In the truck." Wrong guess, Brendan. In fact, if you look at the transcript, there's multiple N's in the word "in the truck," leaving no room for doubt that if you don't hear this and are reading this, that he said in a guessing fashion. Then Mark Wiegert says, "Come on, now, where was she shot? Be honest here." Tom Fassbender, "The truth." Brendan Dassey, "In the garage." This seals it for me. This shows what they were doing. This is enough to draw my conclusion that they were working toward having Brendan Dassey tell their narrative. I'll read it again in full. Tom Fassbender, "Tell us where she was shot." Brendan Dassey, "In the head." Tom Fassbender, "No, I mean where? In the garage." Brendan Dassey, "Oh." Tom Fassbender, "Outside? In the house?" Brendan Dassey, "In the garage." Tom Fassbender, "Okay." Mark Wiegert, "Was she on the garage floor or was she in the truck?" Brendan Dassey, "In the truck." Mark Wiegert, "Come on now, where was she shot? Be honest here." Tom Fassbender, "The truth." Brendan Dassey, "In the garage." I don't know how you can interpret this any other way. They now have MMO, they have their narrative, and they have it all on tape. Evidence be damned. Either that or they'll believe a 16-year-old kid with the mind of a kid half his age making stuff up than their own eyes after years of police work. If they're honestly doing their jobs, they're idiots who should be removed of command without pay or pension, and I would tell them that to their face. Page 72, when he finally says the garage a second time, you get Mark Wiegert with, "Now that makes sense. Now we believe you." Page 78, even though it's pretty well speculated, which is why it was never entered into evidence, that whatever tech processing Teresa Halbach's RAV4 more than likely inadvertently transferred some Steven Avery DNA onto the hood latch due to not changing gloves before touching the latch. Even with that and the spot of Steven Avery's DNA being on the hood, the only other evidence of Steven Avery being there was his blood DNA, which was more than likely planted. No fingerprints, no sweat, and they couldn't even verify where the Steven Avery DNA came from, so the prosecution theorized that it was sweat. No hair, no fibers, no nothing. Tom Fassbender says, okay, did he go and look at the engine? Did he raise the hood at all or anything like that? Do something to that car? What did he do under the hood, if that's what he did? Why would you add that on top of asking when you know damn well that your guy messed up and cross-contaminated the vehicle with Steven Avery's DNA? The only options are you're stupid or you're planting testimony. If you know that your guy cross-contaminated that, yet Brendan Dassey says something to that effect that Steven Avery did touch that, well, now you can use that as your evidence. And why not? Everything else is false. Page 81. When asked how Steven Avery got scratched, even though Brendan just told them about the cut, he says, and this is Brendan Dassey, probably when he was under the hood. Yet these clowns believe this? No, but it sure goes to evidence to say that Steven Avery was there. Page 87, Tom Fassbender. Before we get that, and they're talking about soda because they're about to break, does anyone else know this? Page 90. Tom Fassbender says, I guarantee you Teresa's not standing on the porch when you come home from school. I have a problem with the car sitting out front yet at this time either. Next thing out of Brendan Dassey's mouth is, I got off the bus, I could see her Jeep in the garage just sitting there, and I didn't see Steven and her on the porch. These detectives have to be mentally fapping themselves. I'm sure they can't believe how easy this is. Nothing he is saying is anything out of his own mouth. It's all parroting what they say. Because they've got to be saying, he's already admitted to raping her and slitting her throat. He's not going to be truthful about the rest of this? Page 94. Tom Fassbender says, do you remember anything about the burn barrel? You might want to be a little bit more truthful now. Page 95. Mark Wiegert says, it's really important that you continue being honest with us. Okay, don't start lying now. Are these detectives not smart enough to catch on that he's parroting everything they're saying? Teresa Hallbach's personal items, camera, phone, purse, when asked numerous times, he finally says that they're all there. I don't think I mentioned this before, but that True Crime Cases blog stated, and I don't know where they got this now that I've read most of this stuff, perhaps it's coming up, that Brendan Dassey was on his bike and went and got the mail, and he just happened to pass the burn barrel and conveniently stopped to look inside, and lo and behold, he magically saw a cell phone and a camera. Again, Deus Ex Machina. Stuff just happens to appear at the perfect time. Either way, he only says this stuff after the detective lists all the things that they know were in there. Nothing more, nothing less. He didn't say he saw any glasses or shoes or a belt buckle, only what they have stated. They ask if he's being honest. Why not do the same thing that they did in Jurassic Park with the Stegosaurus? Ask him about things that couldn't possibly be there, i.e. the shoes, glasses, belt buckle, etc. Why didn't they ask him if he saw items to facilitate the crime that weren't in there, i.e. something like, did he stab her with a sickle? You know, that thing on the USSR flag that they used to cut down wheat? Or did he stab her with the bayonet on the end of a rifle? Come on, Brendan, we know he ties her legs to a tree and her hands to a truck and uses the truck to rip her apart. We know that. The forensic doctor told us she was ripped limb from limb. Not cut, but ripped, and the truck is the only thing that can do that. It ripped her arms and legs off and the torso plopped to the ground. Did he rip her apart using the truck? Something to that effect. If they even have a hint that this kid's lying, why didn't they employ this tactic? Again, 3 choices. Scrabble blindness, stupidity, or intention. You tell me. I know which one I think it is. Convince me, Verbal. Page 101. Mark Wiegert says, did you get any blood on you? Brendan Dassey says no. Okay, how the hell do you believe someone that they just slit someone's throat, but yet somehow didn't get any blood on them, and then move on to the next question? I find it interesting that out of all the things that Tom Fassbender is confused about is how Steven Avery had a fire started for this cremation already, yet what he had planned was to throw the body in the pond, but changed his mind to do the fire instead. I.e., why would he start the fire if the pond was his first choice, not the fire? Again, as I mentioned before, he was going to throw her in the pond, but the pond was supposedly dry, which I pretty much disproved. So there's that too. Then Brendan Dassey says that the fire was because he and Blaine were supposed to have people over, but Travis called him and told him that he couldn't come, but yet he had to wait a half hour for Blaine to get off the phone from calling his friend so that he could call Travis. Did they already know that they weren't coming over earlier in the day? If so, why would they then call their friends in the evening? If they can't come over to the fire that night, it probably means that they're busy, i.e., not home and doing something else. And if they're not home, they can't answer a phone call. Why would they then be home for Blaine and Brendan to call that night? You see, Brendan Dassey's original testimony said that they couldn't come over, and nowhere did he say he made a phone call until the police started questioning him. And out of all this stuff, the only thing that confuses Tom Fassbender is why Steven Avery intended to throw the body in a pond and then went to the fire, but the fire was already burning. Either stupidly selective or this is planned. Page 106. Tom Fassbender says, "You took her out back, you shot her." Brendan Dassey said explicitly that Steven Avery was the one who did the shooting because he couldn't shoot anything anymore after they had to put the cat down, quote-unquote, country style, if you know what I mean. Yet Tom Fassbender says, "you." Was that you as in you guys, or you two, or was he trying to pin this on Brendan Dassey? After hearing the story about how Brendan couldn't shoot anything anymore, he probably backed off. Page 107. Tom Fassbender asks about whether he rolled the creeper or carried the creeper, those things you used to slide underneath cars to work on them. Was this to establish the fact that there's no blood between the garage and the fire pit, much less anywhere? When I drag a deer with a deer cart, those like $200 metal dollies with wheels on them? When I drag a deer with the deer cart from the truck bed 20 feet to the gambrel to hang them up, even when we have painter's plastic, those disposable drop cloths, laid down, in between there, blood still gets everywhere and on the garage floor. And that's a couple of hours after the deer is killed, regardless of whether it's been field dressed or not. Blood gets freaking everywhere. And this is with at least 2 12-gauge slug holes in this animal, not 10. And you're going to tell me that no blood was anywhere when they dragged this human being place to place with holes in her? Page 114. If Teresa Halbach was already dead and he talked to Jody right afterwards, wouldn't the full tilt boogie be in effect? Adrenaline might still be going, but I'm sure they talked within a day. Page 115. Mark Wiegert says that if you cut someone's throat, they bleed a lot. So he says, quote, "So I know you had blood on you." Yet there's no blood on the mattress or anything else at all. Yet he's concerned with only the blood on Brendan Dassey? This happened 4 months ago, so it's not like there's still some evidence that hasn't come to light because it hasn't been processed. This is garbage. This guy is either stupid or this is a setup. Page 119. In the video, Mark Wiegert now sits next to Brendan Dassey after asking if anything else happened in the garage. Is this to find out what really happened instead of this bull story? Or is this to find something to tack on another charge? Page 123. Brendan Dassey asks how to spell rack. Yes, rack. It's a 4-letter word. Remember the movie Billy Madison and the Smelling Bee? Rock. R-O-K and R-O-C-K. This kid is a sophomore? Is the school system that bad in Michigan? Or is he really in remedial classes? Page 124. So Brendan Dassey supposedly cuts off 3 inches of Teresa Halbach's hair. From the back? As she's lying face up, shackled to the bed? Teresa Halbach had chin-length hair in every picture I've ever seen her in. Not to mention that blood gets very sticky as it dries. Couple that with hair, and you have almost an uncleanable mess. Where's one shred of this evidence? It's been 4 months and they couldn't use an aerial view of the property to ask him where this and that happened. They make him draw it. They could easily have him sign a picture. Page 125. They ask if Steven Avery's .22 was a single shot or a semi-auto. It's a semi-auto, and he says it's a single shot. And they know damn well that it's a semi-auto, but they don't elaborate on that key fact. Are they going over the differences between the two to ask how it went down? I would, seeing as that could help my case. But if you don't want that help, you wouldn't ask. Or they're idiots. And I hate to have to keep pointing that out, but with every example, it becomes more and more likely and even more infuriating. Oh, God. Page 127, Brendan Dassey. How do you spell garage? Page 129. Brendan Dassey is a country boy, yet doesn't know his directions. Although he's young, that's still odd. Page 136. Brendan Dassey says that Steven Avery was wanting to leave and run away when they went up north to the cabin during the search of their property, and according to Brendan Dassey, Steven Avery's dad said to Steven Avery, If you're going to try and leave, then that means you did it. So he sat back down. And he didn't leave. Bingo! Page 137. Tom Fossbender asks if she had pubic hair, and Brendan Dassey says yes. Did they ask the ex if this was the case? This was around the time, at least in Playboy, when all the playmates were sans hair. Did she visit an esthetician? Did they ever look into that? That and he doesn't remember a tattoo on her stomach? Considering Brendan Dassey said she was face up and remembers pubic hair, why wouldn't he remember a tattoo, especially when Steven Avery supposedly stabbed Teresa Halbach in the stomach? Wouldn't he have noticed that Steven Avery stabbed her next to her tattoo?
De pain.
Sorry, had to. Page 138. Tom Fossbender asks about the tattoo and Brendan Dassey doesn't remember. Tom Fossbender: do you disagree with me when I say that? Brendan Dassey: no, but I don't know where it is. Is this Tom Fossbender solidifying his authority that what he says is what's going to be true? If they wanted to sculpt his story, it sure would be. Page 139. When asked why he did it, Brendan Dassey says, I don't know. Then says, I wanted to see how it felt, meaning sex. So, by that claim, he's a virgin. And unless prison hasn't been nice to him, which probably has been the case, he still is. He's also asked why he didn't stop it. He says that Steven Avery threatened him, but then recants and says that, Brendan Dassey's talking now, he didn't threaten me. I just thought that he could have, because he's bigger than me, that he could probably beat me up in that. Okay, Steven Avery's about 5'6", according to his mugshot, and Brendan Dassey's about 5'10", and Steve is bigger than he is? Tom Fossbender: so, you telling us now that he never threatened you? Brendan Dassey: no. Tom Fossbender: and you admit that you knew this? That you had told us that on Monday? Bam! They got him. Case closed, and the sarcophagus is now sealed. Enjoy your life, Sheriff and Company. You're now free. Because Brendan Dassey has now just admitted that he did all this stuff, and he did so of his own volition because Steven Avery never threatened him. I'm betting that this night these two dudes got so plowed and drove so drunk that it was one for the record books. Page 140. Tom Fossbender: if Steven tells us that you did all of this, that you had started it and had killed her and stuff, is that true? Brendan Dassey: no. Mark Wiegert: don't forget your Pepsi down there. We're going to step out for a couple of minutes, okay? This is odd. Not only did he just admit doing it without being threatened, he now says no, it's not true. And right now they decide to take a break? Are they afraid he's going to unincriminate himself? Kind of like well, we better go now and find out something to charge him with before he starts talking and proclaims his innocence. It's also odd because Tom Fossbender is stammering, trying to adequately concoct what he's going to say. He could have said something like, if Steven says you did all this, would he be telling the truth or lying? Or, what if Steven says you did it? This wording of you had killed her, is that true, is strange. Except for the fact that this type of wording has gotten most of Brendan Dassey's confessions for this crime. Then, right at this moment, they decide to take a break. Why? It almost seems like they're going to go discuss how much they want to try and pin on him right now versus Steven Avery. Like, maybe we can get him to take the fall that way, and all we have to do is tie Steven Avery to the one thing, and he's sunk too, but how are we going to do that? Type of thing. Don't know. Let's find out. Either way, now they decide to take a break. Odd. Oh, surprise. Next step is them arresting him, and of course he thinks that it's for one day. I guess I was right when I said the sarcophagus is now sealed. Perhaps these guys are smarter than I've been giving them credit for. If they did do this as a setup, then it's brilliant. With the stupidity of the questions and the lack of follow-up, you'd really have to look for the pinpoints in this, just like the Jurassic Park Stegosauruses. Stegosaurii? I don't know. If they've been doing this for so long that they knew how to do this without drawing attention, then kudos to them, but I really don't think that's the case. Yet nothing else explains the result except for sheer dumb luck. I'm sure that if you look through the text thread from a significant other months after the fact, that you could extract instances of meanness, flirting, lying, etc., when at the moment the words themselves said anything but. I.e., if you're looking for something bad enough, I'm sure you can find it. And I'm sure that's what a lot of you will say that I'm doing here. But my honest assessment is that on the surface, they have Scrabble blindness, and they do a piss poor job of being detectives. But if the genes catalyst theory I have is true, then these two need to join the CIA after a stint in prison. Let's check out the end of the tape. But before I do that, what did they tell Brendan Dassey's mom? Is she aware of what is about to happen, or at least in theory? Did she soon after or ever at all get to see these tapes? Don't you think that they should have played them for her so she could say whether or not, at least for the timeline, that Brendan Dassey's story can still hold water? It kind of plays into the genes catalyst theory if they don't do these things, because if she starts to contradict anything that Brendan Dassey says, it unravels their strategy. If you're in an actual pursuit of the truth, you'd like to cross all your I's and dot your T's. Yes, I said that in homage to this duo here, yet why would they not do this? I know that if I were a detective and it came out after the fact that this evidence to the contrary came about that I could have verified, and they play this tape, that I'd have to embarrassingly admit why I didn't follow up on this major oops. These guys are seasoned professionals. Why wouldn't they want to do that? Well, knowing that a magic bullet is discovered within hours of this brings me back from Scrabble blindness to the genes catalyst of purposefully trying to sculpt the narrative to put two innocent men behind bars to protect their brothers in blue. If they suspected that the shell casings had bullets from the murder attached to them, they would have found them then. Either way, the lack of evidence in the garage should have been enough to determine that this story was fake. But why shoot the gift horse in the mouth when the words coming out of that mouth do the one thing you could never do? And now on to the end of the video. Before Brendan's mom comes in, something happens that I don't think people realize, and if this isn't the case, please let me know. They already grabbed his jeans, which lead them to this interview which nails the coffin shut, so to speak. They also asked to grab his shoes and his jacket that he was wearing that day. Why didn't they grab them when they grabbed his jeans? Covering their tracks, it would seem. We got his jeans in an unsavory way, so we need to have something to show as the result of this interview, so they leave out the shoes and the jacket to have something to grab later, even though it was an outfit for that day. An all-in-one evidence present, but just like the jeans, they mean nothing in the grand scheme of evidence. They're merely regalia pawns in this elaborate show. So the shoes and the jacket are superfluous, and of course they find nothing on them either, but to my original point, if they grab his shoes and jacket that he supposedly wore that day, then those articles of clothing become evidence in a case and can never be returned to the owner. Why is this important? Because they sit in an evidence bag, in an evidence locker or a storage unit until, and this is only speculation for these two actions, but the person or persons accused in the case are set free like Steven Avery was, or the person or all persons involved in a case die off. Even then, I think they may keep it in storage for a little while longer, but point is, if these pieces of clothing or whatever the item is are now official evidence in a case, the only way that you can have someone examine them from that point forward is 1, if the case is still active, and even still, I think the testing on those items are done by the jurisdiction's own crime lab, or 2, if the case has gone to trial and it's over and finished, the only way you can have those pieces of evidence examined further is if you get a court order to get permission to do so. Remember when Steven Avery's DNA test was denied? Even then, I think the jurisdictional body does the testing for that as well, unless the test is one that they don't do. They had to get a court order to process Steven Avery's blood for DNA exoneration, which is where the vial in question in this case comes from, and also the one hair with the skin tag on it from the Penny Bernstein sexual assault kit that ultimately led to Gregory Allen and Steven Avery's release. Because that was a piece of evidence in a case, they had to prove to the judge that there was a reason to test this stuff, and almost all of it was denied up until the last hope. If it weren't for the fact that Gregory Allen was a criminal and was already in the DNA system when the results came through on that hair test, Steven Avery would probably still be sitting in prison for the 32-year sentence for the original crime he didn't commit, because even though it would have said that the DNA wasn't his, it wouldn't have conclusively pointed to someone else, much less a known criminal. Think about that. If Gregory Allen would have stopped committing these crimes and his DNA would not have been in the system, he would have never gotten caught, and Steven Avery would still be in prison for something he didn't do. So now, with those pieces of clothing in evidence, if there is any evidence on those articles of clothing that could somehow exonerate either Brendan Dassey or Steven Avery, their lawyers have to petition the court system in those same jurisdictions where the conspiracy is supposedly encompassing the law enforcement and judicial system, and have those supposed conspirators rule on whether or not those procedures are to be allowed. Trick is, this can usually only happen once per shot. So if you use all your chances with the conspirators ruling against you and the higher courts taking the lower courts of the supposed conspirators' rulings into consideration and don't grant the testing, then you're screwed. It's like getting one chance to ask your mom for the car keys to go out on Saturday night, and she says no because she's in a bad mood. But then 2 hours later, she's in a good mood. But sorry, she already said no, so you're screwed. For those of you who are fans of the band AC/DC, their second lead singer, Brian Johnson, told the story about how they were touring with Chuck Berry, and Chuck Berry's band was using their equipment, and he went up to Chuck Berry and asked for an autograph. And Chuck Berry said, "I only sign one autograph per day, so sorry." This is Chuck Berry, one of the founders of rock and roll. I get it. But not only is he using this band's equipment, this band has the second highest selling album in history. And just because he asked for the autograph on the wrong time, on the wrong day, sorry, you're screwed forever. And of course you're thinking, well, why didn't he just ask him the next day early in the morning? Well, he decided to wait till the end of the tour to be nice so he wouldn't bug the poor man. So in essence, he had no other chance. My point is, you're screwed. That is why it is so important that new evidence come out in this case, because if the courts rule that there's no reason for the stuff to be tested, then all hopes are lost. I don't know the law regarding this. Perhaps it goes to the Fifth Amendment with double jeopardy, but I'm sure there's a case that had happened that is tied to that they don't want the system flooded with pointless endeavors for people who are actually certainly guilty but are trying anything not to do the time for the crime they committed. Plus, I also know that the appeals process is slow enough to begin with, so that may be a factor too. But why would you not take the chance to test something to be absolutely sure that you've got the right person behind bars? The Roger K. Coleman case is a good example. Roger Coleman, not Dan Coleman, the guy I mentioned before, which I saw the Full Tilt Boogie in effect. Different last name spelling, many years apart. But as for Roger Coleman, they refused to run the DNA test until after he was executed, and luckily, he ended up being guilty as the test, which was finally run by the successor of the politician who refused to do the testing, concurred. But why would you not run that test? For the same reason this whole debacle took place. That would mean that the government and law enforcement would be on the hook for their wrongdoing without a doubt, with proof that they screwed up. Now, for anyone, that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's a really hard pill to swallow for $36 million. To conclude the interview, page 147. Barb Jonda is now in the room and the detectives are out. Brendan Dassey asks, what had happened if he says something, his story's different? He says he admits to doing it. Is Brendan Dassey saying this because he's innocent and everything he told is garbage and he knows it and is hoping that his uncle will bail him out? Or is he worried that their stories will conflict and the detectives will be mad at him? If it's the latter, then wow, Brendan Dassey really has no clue as to what's going on. Then Barb Jonda says, what do you mean? Brendan Dassey says, like, if his story's like different, like I never did nothing or something. Barb Jonda, did you? Brendan Dassey, not really. Barb Jonda, what do you mean not really? Brendan Dassey, they got to my head. Now the transcript says, ... say anything. And I tried to listen to it over and over, and I can't tell if he says, say anything, and, as in almost trying to say and, say anything, to say anything, like trying to say not to say anything, or if he tries to squeak out, don't say anything. I have no idea, so I can't say anything for sure, but he definitely says the word say anything, which on its own makes no sense. Now, if you watch, the detectives come in right at this point, so he very well could have heard them come in and said, don't say anything. So take it as you will. Now, I'm guessing that they have some sort of closed circuit line leading to a room or a place where you and others can watch and hear this interview taking place live. It may be happenstance timing, but they come in right at that moment as she's asking him these questions. Are they watching and listening and realize that their plan's about to be blasted because he's coming clean to his mother with a quickness that his story is all BS? Remember, I said at the beginning of this that they have this one shot because if Barb Jonda catches whiff of this, it's done. It's over. But once they get him into custody, it's pretty much guaranteed that they've won. There's a very good chance that they heard what was going on because they come in fast and Mark Wiegert sits down very quickly and Tom Fassbender takes extra care not to make noise while closing the door. Now, they're very quiet closing the door the other times too, but this is much more pronounced and it almost seems like overcompensation for haste, and it also allows anything to be said not to be overshadowed by the noise of a closing door so that they can hear anything being said and so the microphone can pick up anything being said. Perhaps I'm grasping at straws, but I'm just following the prosecution's lead, apparently. Granted, they asked him numerous times earlier, almost too many times if you ask me, if he has to use the bathroom, which makes sense since it's been a while and he might have to go and he's probably going to a cell after this, but was the over-asking before to establish they're asking him now as regular protocol? They have been doing this a long time and would certainly want to establish an out if things got hairy, wouldn't they? A kind of out like, say, you're about to tell your mom that the statement you gave us that's going to bury you and your uncle is false, and you're about to tell your mom, so we need to get you away from here as soon as possible, kind of out. And regarding them asking so many times, were they doing that the whole time trying to get him out of that room for something where the camera and the recorder wasn't? I mentioned before that they only had one chance at this, which of course turned out to be correct. I doubt it, but again, just brainstorming here. However, it would give them, if this is their desire, the break away from his mother right now, because as soon as he leaves this room, any communication between Barb Jonda and Brendan Dassey from this point on is recorded and a matter of state record either by phone or visiting, like they tell her when she asks how to talk to Steven Avery. Probably to ask Steven Avery what happened to see if her hunch is correct, which it seems to be that they pressured her son, which she says on camera. It will also get her away from them so that as she's asking these questions about them pressuring him, which she begins to do, Brendan can't start altering his statement. They also do something that further adds meat to this conspiracy. Why would they not, while it's fresh in their minds and Brendan Dassey's mind, and they wouldn't have to do any special checking the prisoner out type paperwork to which all their actions and everything would be monitored, why do they change their minds from what they told him just minutes before on taking him back to his own house and Steven Avery's house to finalize his story with geographic corroboration and testimony? Do they not need it now since they have what they need? Are they afraid that since they know his mother is going to be there and that she already suspects pressuring, that she would poke holes into their BS story and blow the whistle on them? Or might he devastatingly contradict himself, scrapping their one chance at their seal? The reason that it's important to get him away from his mother is that the minute he is booked and becomes an inmate, anything that happens has to be done through the courts, which not only takes time, but usually has to go through an attorney, to which Barb Jonda just asked the detectives about so they know that she can't afford anyone who will threaten them. She obviously doesn't know anything about major case protocol regarding the court system because she stated that she tried to get a public defender for another recent minor occurrence, and she obviously can't afford an attorney. So if Barb Jonda wants answers to her suspicions, the court system all but guarantees that she will never get those answers. I'm sure she knows this looking back on it, but the only way that she stood a chance was to be able to talk to her son either longer in this situation in this interview room or with him when he went back to the property to seal his testimony, and Barb Jonda would have certainly asked the necessary questions, probably on audio and or video, thus shattering the case that the detectives just made. Remember, I said before this, assuming that my crazy genes catalyst theory was correct, that Tom Fassbender and Mark Wiegert had one shot at this because if Barb Jonda caught wind of this, then they would be sniffed out. Looks like my predictions have thus far been correct. I'm glad I wrote that and videotaped it. Before I forget, does anyone know if they ever got back to do that? Bring Brendan Dassey back to the property to solidify his testimony? They certainly seemed at the time that they had a lot of unanswered questions about this story versus the evidence. My guess would be no, giving even more credibility to my crazy genes catalyst theory. But if anyone knows of evidence to the contrary, please let me know. Mark Wiegert says, as soon as we leave here, we'll go out there. I don't think we're going to bring Brendan out there, though. I just don't think that's a good idea. No kidding, pray tell. To continue with Mark Wiegert's quote from the transcript, I don't think he needs to be exposed to that or be out there anymore. It's not going to do him any good. On the contrary, Mark, it would be the one thing that would do him any good. And what is with or be out there anymore? He's never going to be out there ever again for the next 40 years, so what harm would being out there this one more time do? And I don't think he needs to be exposed to that. Why, Mark? He just got this huge weight lifted off his chest, didn't he? Now he shouldn't confront his demons or help you solidify this case, not to mention the fact that he supposedly raped, slit, and cremated another human being. And you're afraid now, all of a sudden, that little Wendy might get scared and wet his Betty Boy if he goes back out there? You know, I tried. I really tried to believe that this wasn't a setup, but now I really can't claim otherwise. Let's finish this finally, shall we, before I write War and Peace on this interview? Page 149, Mark Wiegert. This is going to be on the media tonight. Barb Jonda, oh God. Mark Wiegert, there's no way to stop it. Actually, there is, Mark. If you were going to go back out to the property, wouldn't you only do that because there were things still left unanswered? Also, wouldn't you want to check to make absolutely sure that whatever is going to be blasted all over the media is correct so that your department doesn't look like a bunch of buffoons like they did in the, wait for it, Steven Avery case? But no, you know that this is a line of bull, which will be blasted on the TV tonight, which is a mere hours after you receive this information with no following up on it, which the press conference actually turns out to be the next day, the exact same day when the magic bullet was found, will be enough to solidify your narrative into the minds of the public so that regardless of what information came out contradicting the press conference afterwards, because what happens first and largest is what people believe. A good, thorough cop would dot the I's before releasing such a story, especially since in the film, you guys are shown again in an interview in May, 2 months after Brendan Dassey is arrested, that have you guys still not sure about some things because there are, as Todd Fassbender says, quote, some areas that you might want to address because they don't seem to add up. Wouldn't that be something you'd want to clarify first before going public with this information, Tom? Information that's going to have Brendan Dassey rot in a cell behind bars until he's older than you are now? Wouldn't that be good for you to be able to sleep at night? You know, like you told Brendan Dassey before you coerced his statements so that you could live your life with a clear conscience? You know, that whole truth thing. On the other hand, if you wanted to make sure that your version of October 31st is what stands the test of time to both the public eye and the courtroom, you'll release it as soon as you can in the most grandiose of fashions before Barb Jonda or anyone else can question the information and tactics of your department. I mean, the cops are the ones who know how powerful the media is in these sorts of situations. Sorry, Mark. Sorry, Tom. I see what you're up to. Page 150, Mark Wiegert. You know, I can leave you here alone, but this is all recorded and videotaped. Do you understand that? Barb Jonda, I don't care. Mark Wiegert, okay, all right. Do you want to be left alone with him for 5 minutes, or it doesn't matter at this point? Barb Jonda, it doesn't matter. Great move, Mark. Well played. Let her know that this is all on video, so if we leave you alone, if he incriminates himself any further, it's on tape. Then you ask if she wants to be left alone, or it doesn't matter at this point, because, hey, you gave her a chance, so it's not like it looks that you're trying to get her out of the room, but you add that little wrinkle in just in case. How do I know? That's what I would do. She's already stressed, so instead of talking with him alone to which he may blab something to expose his innocence, she ends the discussion. Bad move, Barb. If there was ever a moment in time that you would like to do over, knowing what you know now, I'm sure it's this one right here. And within 5 sentences, it's time to go. Mark Wiegert. Okay, let's go. Barb, is this yours? Pounding the final nail in the coffin of this case. Page 151. Barb Jonda comes in to give Brendan Dassey one last hug as a free man. Sorry, kid. And even though this entire exchange takes less than 20 seconds, you can see Mark Wiegert come in and sit back down in the chair and immediately start nervously tapping his fingers on the arm of the chair like a poker player with a bad tell. He doesn't hang his head like an experienced cop who sees yet another young life lost from a stupid decision. You tap your fingers like a poker amateur waiting for the schlep across the table to call your nut's hand. And as she leaves, thus concludes this story. Which also concludes my observations of this case. I understand why it took these two documentary makers 10 years to get this done. Some stuff I say is repeated in various spots, and I apologize for that, but due to time constraints for editing purposes, I'm going to leave it as is and leave it in. But another reason that I do that and I'm going to leave it is because a lot of times when people are listening to something, a lot of information gets thrown at them or they daydream or whatever, so they miss a key piece of evidence. And then they think, well, why not this when I clearly discussed that earlier to answer their question? So